Our guest speaker today is a member of our parish. Elizabeth Yore served as special counsel at Harpo Inc. for 5 years. In that position, she acted as Oprah Winfrey's child advocate, both with the Oprah Winfrey Show and in South Africa, the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls. Prior to that position, Liz was general counsel for the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, the Illinois statewide child welfare agency. At DCFS, Liz created the first missing child unit, which required the DCFS to immediately notify the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children when a foster child went missing. Illinois has been the leader in that initiative. She also spearheaded a program to aggressively prosecute human trafficking cases in the department. Prior to DCFS, Liz was general counsel at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Virginia and its first director of the International Division handling international child abduction cases. She appears on EWTN and Relevant Radio talking about child protection issues. Please join me in welcoming Liz Yore.
Thank you, Father, and thank you everybody for coming today. When Father was talking about Dante's Inferno, I know human trafficking is a disturbing topic, and I thought, well, maybe I should describe it as Dante's Inferno, or better yet, to allure people to come to speak, to hear this talk, we should call it The Secrets of the Vatican, or perhaps 12 Years a Slave, which is the movie in Hollywood that won the best Oscar. It's been just an exciting career in child advocacy, and I was so blessed to be invited to come to the Pontifical Trafficking Conference at the Vatican. And one of the things that I'd like to talk to you today about is to kind of give you the behind-the-scenes look at that conference, also tell you about human trafficking, both from my perspective globally, here in the North Shore, where in fact it does happen from time to time. But this is the interesting thing about the church. Really, the church has been in the forefront in fighting slavery. And there has been no century or no country that has been free of human trafficking. So today, let's pull back the curtain on human trafficking. Human trafficking is now described as modern-day slavery. It forces victims into prostitution, involuntary servitude, degrading and inhuman labor. Today, it's estimated there are 30 million people worldwide who are enslaved through human trafficking. This exceeds, and this is shocking to me, this exceeds the record of the entire time of the 400-year slave trade. So to say that this has become an epidemic of proportions that we've never seen in the history of mankind, it is true. I want to show you, hiding in plain sight is really what I feel very strongly, that human trafficking is right in front of our eyes, but because these victims are concealed, they're threatened, they're intimidated, we don't often see them right in front of our eyes. I'm going to show you a quick, it's a trailer, a public service announcement. You'll recognize the person in this, it's the actress Emma Thompson. And it's kind of a clever description of the wide range of victims in human trafficking. Just a short trailer here.
I was promised a better life, far away from my home. I used to have a family.
Now, I must pay for my family's debts.
I sleep with many men every day. They make me kill for a war.
Work many long hours.
Trapped, beaten, scared, locked in the dark.
With no way out.
I want to go home. I want my freedom.
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 That captures in a dramatic way the various victims of human trafficking. And today I'd like to talk about the perspective of the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church has really been in the forefront, not only preventing human trafficking, but also intervening in the lives of victims. When we got to the Pontifical Conference, we initially heard the story from a Cambodian aid worker about a little 10-year-old girl by the name of Tevi. Tevi attended a Catholic school run by the Salesian nuns. The Salesian nuns have been in Cambodia working with the very, very poor, the very vulnerable for over 20 years. And they've run this big school and orphanage. Tevi was one of the best students. She was diligent. She never missed a day of school. And all of a sudden, she missed 2 days in a row. And the principal, Sister Orfino, was very concerned about her, because she knew, like all the children, they wouldn't miss a day of school because that was the only time that they got their meal. 1 meal a day, it was at school. So Sister Orfina immediately went to the shack, the little metal shack that Tevi's parents lived in. And she confronted her parents and said, "Where is Tevi?" He tried to lie to her and not tell her exactly where she was. And finally, Sister Orfina insisted, "What did you do with your daughter?" And Tevi's parents said, "We sold her to a trafficker." And Sister Orfina was able to get the address of the trafficker in Phnom Penh. And she immediately went to the trafficker. And she found out that the trafficker gave her parents $50 in exchange for their daughter. And what did Sister Orfina do? I mean, this is the Catholic imagination, the fearlessness, the fervor of a woman of God. She gave the trafficker $100, redeemed Tevi from a life of early death from AIDS and a life of prostitution and slavery. There's millions of stories like this in the Catholic Church, with the missionaries in Cambodia and Thailand and Africa and South America and Latin America. This is the church we know. You know, the church doesn't pat itself on the back, it doesn't talk about these stories, but this is the work of the church, not only helping by preventing human traffickers from taking children, but intervening in the lives. And it's from that story that I think is a great starting off point from the Pontifical Conference. Sisters' heroic actions are ones that I think that we can repeat not only in the faraway missions in Cambodia, but also here in the North Shore. And the Catholic Church has been sounding the alarm forever about slavery. One of, I think, and Father would know, probably the smallest, the shortest book in the Bible is St. Paul's letter to Philemon. And in this short letter in the Bible is St. Paul is asking Philemon to free the slave Onesimus, that Onesimus is a free man. And if Onesimus owes you any money, Philemon, I will pay it. And so this has been something that the church has not shied away from. The church has been very involved. In fact, you know, probably one of the first freed slaves was Christ freeing the 7 demons from Mary Magdalene. This is the work of the church. This is the work not only of slavery of sin, slavery of dysfunction, slavery of labor. This is where the church has been involved. And fast forward, this has not been something that has been ignored by the popes. Benedict himself deplored the human trafficking of human beings, especially women. John Paul II talked about human trafficking, constituted a shocking offense against human dignity, a violation of human rights. This is the work of the church, and although, you know, it's now become very fashionable to talk about human trafficking, we see it kind of everywhere, it's been the talk of the church and the work of the church forever. What is the reality of human trafficking? These are the shocking statistics. And quite frankly, we're not really sure if these statistics are right. This is a hidden, a concealed crime. We don't know how many people are actually involved, but the UN gives these figures. 800,000 people are trafficked across international borders every year. 1 million children exploited each year by the global sex trade. 50% of the children trafficked, the people trafficked are children. Women and girls are 80% of the trafficking victims. And of course, it's always about following the money. This is a very, very lucrative trade, $32 billion every year. So along comes Pope Francis, and in the first 6 months of his pontificate, He's talking about human trafficking at the Wednesday audiences, at the Sunday audiences, in his private masses at Doma Santa Marta. He's talking about human trafficking. When the ambassadors come in to present their credentials to him in their white tie and tails, he's talking about human trafficking, pointing his finger at them and saying, you must do something about human trafficking in your country. So this is a short clip about the conference that I went to.
Pope Francis and Monsignor Marcelo Sanchez Orondo was how the idea for a conference came about. The Pontifical Academies of Sciences and Social Sciences will organize on November 2nd and 3rd a conference to analyze the problem of human trafficking, a widespread crime throughout the world. Fundamentally, there are three dimensions. One is the sale of weapons, the second is drugs, and the third is human trafficking. But it seems that according to some, human trafficking is becoming the most lucrative of the three. The Vatican will propose several ideas to be included in the Palermo Protocol, an agreement signed by over 100 countries to fight human trafficking. Some of those ideas come from Spanish professor José Lorente. There's one to create an archive with a DNA code for all missing persons, for children that are found without knowing where they came from, and there's many. And also for people who come forward and claim missing persons. Then, adding together all the genetic codes, naturally we will find the parents and the child's origin. Each year, about 2 million people are victims of sexual exploitation, and nearly 60% are women. But the problem is not limited to poor countries. It has emerged as a worldwide issue. It also affects the rich countries that create the demand, but it especially hurts the poor countries because they're the source for human traffickers. International experts and researchers are expected to attend the conference. It'll be the first of 3 separate events that will take place in the future.
So that was the conference that I attended, and I wanted to share with you Pope Francis's apostolic exhortation. He issued it a few months ago, Evangelii Gaudium, and in it he talks about human trafficking. And in the red, I think, is kind of the tough words that he talks about. There is greater complicity than we think. The issue involves everyone. This infamous network of crime is now well established in our cities, and many people have blood on their hands as a result of their comfortable and silent complicity. I don't know about you, but I think those are fighting words. And as I read everything that Pope Francis has said, it occurred to me that it was important to find out, where did he come from? What is going on in Argentina and Buenos Aires? I mean, after all, here we are in the postmodern, highly technological, highly educated society, drenched in human rights lingo, treaties, laws, wealthier than ever, and yet modern slavery is skyrocketing. The rich countries create the demand, and the poor countries provide the supply. This heinous crime has no boundaries, neither geopolitical nor cultural, and it really defies quantification. And so the Pope actually challenged us to find out what is going on, what are the best resources that are available, and what needs to be done. Here's a picture of the conference. Interestingly, up on that screen, one of the people who was testifying and talking about what was going on was an Argentinian activist. This man told us about what the streets are like in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. He works on a daily basis with human trafficking victims. In Argentina, especially in Buenos Aires, last year, 700 women were kidnapped off the streets, literally disappeared, and were sent into human trafficking and prostitution. That is the culture that Pope Francis has come from. The police are corrupt, according to this Argentinian activist. The judicial system is corrupt. The mafia literally runs society. So they cannot prosecute their way out of this crime. They cannot escape out of the human trafficking. So that is kind of the backdrop of what Buenos Aires, Argentina, the homeland of the Pope, is about. And you know, Argentina is much like the rest of the world. I mean, we are in a unique situation in the United States where our judicial system isn't corrupt. Our police actually do investigate missing kids cases. Our police do prosecute human trafficking. So it is with that energy, that pain. Interestingly, that activist told us that the Pope was on the street at night helping to get women out of trafficking. He truly is a man of the streets, and I think quite obviously his charism is a feeling for the poor and to try and raise the exposure of the suffering of the poor for the church as a whole. So that was the backdrop of kind of understanding where the Pope is coming from and how he really firsthand understands human trafficking. He's been there, he's seen it on the streets. I had to show that, I apologize, but I had to show you. That's the guy in the white is the Pope. We were surprised with the meet and greet for the Pope. We were told that there would be a formal picture with the Pope. So we all bussed down to Domo Santa Marta, which is, as you know, where the Pope lives, the apartment building, kind of hotel. And out he comes, and so we're all standing very formally waiting for the picture. And within seconds, the whole group just folds around him, and he's shaking everybody's hand, and he's talking to everybody. I forgot all my Italian. I know no Spanish, so all I could say is I'm from Chicago. He understands Chicago. So, but you know, to me it was very touching that he would spend the kind of time and personal touch that he had with people. Interestingly, see the young man behind me? He was the other Argentinian activist. I think he was going to jump over me to see the Pope. I mean, it was quite obvious that he and the Pope knew each other, went way back. They had left the conference a couple times to have meals with the Pope. So it was, you know, under that backdrop that I understood kind of the work of the Pope and truly his concern for human trafficking victims. As I said, he's a man of the streets. He knows the suffering poor, the disenfranchised. And he really wants the church to focus on this issue. And I think Argentina is an example of how things can really spiral out of control. And for that reason, I think he's looking, and I wanted to show you some of the headlines in some of the various papers of the Pope talking about human trafficking. So what is the global scope of this problem? The data, as I said, we just simply don't know if it's all that accurate. No one really knows. This is a covert crime. It's carried out in the shadows with terrified and silenced victims who are so concealed that they can't be counted and oftentimes can't be rescued. Organized crime gangs are now fully entrenched in human trafficking. It is the criminal enterprise of human trafficking. You know, once a gun is sold, it's gone. But a woman or a child can be sold repeatedly. I worked in a case in the United States, actually in Chicago, where the human traffickers were living in million-dollar homes in the south suburbs. They had several expensive cars. They wore very expensive jewelry, minks, and everything else. And the victims were penniless, starving, and living in flea bag hotels. But sex definitely remains the primary reason for trafficking, but forced labor is also another thriving industry. Here's some headlines, and that we heard a great deal about. There's many religious working in India about the trafficking of women and children for labor in the sweatshops of Bangladesh and India. This is truly slavery. They get paid virtually nothing, work long, hard hours in terrible conditions. There was also some British people there who were talking about the new concern in the EU is the smuggling of organs for the purposes of retransplantation. So they're seeing a great increase in trafficking for human organs. Here's from the Daily Telegraph. But the other shocking thing that came out of the conference is that we're now seeing a skyrocketing demand for children, for babies. Babies are the new consumer product. And you know, it's interesting, we were not prepared to hear about babies as consumer products. With the new globalization, with the new demand for same-sex couples demanding children, you have probably seen the whole rise in surrogacy laws, and surrogacy is painted as a very loving, kind, charitable thing to do for couples wanting children. But at the conference, we had a number of nuns who were telling us about women who were literally kidnapped off the street, impregnated, and their children were sold in this new market of surrogacy. The demand is growing rapidly as we speak. It's the seizure of wombs to rent for couples who need children. Children are the new commodity in the human trafficking world. But interestingly, the other tragic thing is that China's one-child policy is now coming of age. Chinese families, as you know, faced with state-mandated one child per couple, chose boys as opposed to girls as their only children. With the widespread endorsement of same-sex selection in abortion in China, and by the way, it's moved to India, it's all over Asia. There is sex selection abortion going all over Asia. There are not, the demographers, these are demographers from Harvard, by the way, are now saying that there are 300 million fewer females in Asia. So needless to say, this is creating a social, a political, and a moral crisis of enormous proportions. You know, when humanity interferes with the perfect plan of God, chaos, exploitation, and violence reigns. So what is happening with 300 million fewer women? We now see that women are now being trafficked into China. AIDS is exploding into China. There is literally calamity exploding among the Asian people, and we're going to continue to see more and more of this. But what's happening in the United States? I mean, the global picture is very, very grim, and it can be at times overwhelming. But in the United States, and I wanted to show you this clip of a trailer on the United States human trafficking.
I was 13. I was really young, and people that fought me were people that were looking for, child fetishes.
I was like 15 if I remember, and I was really scared.
You cut with a knife to be able to penetrate me. I was really hard.
I was crying because I was scared, and he had sex with me. And that was my first time. I still had on my school uniform.
Men who come here to abuse children in Cambodia have 99.9% of the time already abused children in their own country.
We as a nation are going to have to sit back, take a deep breath, and realize, oh my God, this is in our neighborhoods, in our families, in our communities. It's right under our noses.
We frequently see drugs and psychological brainwashing become part of the process of keeping them committed to the offender.
Men will actually fly into Atlanta, get on the internet, say, I want a boy who has no hair on his head, no hair anywhere, I want him to look like he's 13, I want him to be no taller than 5'2", ordered, show up here, have sex, and be gone.
sexual exploitation of children has become a cottage industry, driven by the internet.
It's very difficult for us to define the problem of child pornography to the American public because it's something we obviously can't show them.
There are some of the acts that I couldn't even describe to you. Against children so young that no normal person could look at that without being disturbed.
It ain't about sex. It just be about business. That's it. Once you get them to go the first time, then you got a better chance of getting them to keep going.
I was really nervous and I was really scared. And she was holding his gun and shot me. Cannot arrest 11, 12, and 13-year-olds and charge them with prostitution. Cannot criminalize children. I think people view the prostitution like a victimless crime. Most of the girls that we come across nowadays are 13, 14, 15 years old. I know these girls didn't wake up one morning and say, I want to be a prostitute today.
There are millions and millions of photos of children who are being sexually abused. Nobody knows who these children are.
And it raises the question to us, are there that many pedophiles out there? Or is something else happening?
Well, it's not a pretty picture, not a pretty playground, but that's the reality in the United States. And I wanted to show you kind of, this is an explanation of kind of the huge increase in calls to the U.S. trafficking hotline. You can see they keep on nearly doubling every year. And it just shows you, it captures really how this has become a serious problem in the United States, both because of the internet, because of the ability to travel with great ease, and because of, and as you saw in that trailer, the between pornography and in prostitution and human trafficking, they're all linked. So that when we dismiss or minimize pornography or prostitution, we need to stop and think that we're really talking about largely children who actually enter into pornography and prostitution at a very, very young age. So the numbers continue to go up. Here are some of the hot spots in the United States. You can't even see Chicago. And these are where the calls are coming in from. Obviously, you know, the coast, Miami, Florida, Chicago, Atlanta are kind of the destination points for bringing in victims of human trafficking and then sending them out all around the world. But I guess the question is why should Catholics on the North Shore be concerned about human trafficking? Isn't that something happening in a distant land? Well, you know, as often as I give this speech, people come up to me afterwards and they keep on saying, well, I want to tell you a story about Libertyville or Highwood, about a human trafficking case. One of the cases that I worked on, in fact, involved children up here in Lake County. So it is hidden in plain sight here in Lake County. In America, as you saw, 300,000 minors can be victims of sex trafficking at any given time, according to the Justice Department. The picture is actually far more grim, but this kind of gives you an idea of what is going on. You know, I don't believe you can prosecute your way out of this problem. It's too enormous. We don't have the resources in law enforcement. But we do know that the sex trafficking industry is in residential brothels, it's in hostess clubs, it's on online escort services, it's in fake massage businesses, strip clubs. That's where it's centered in the United States. And my experience is routine missing children's cases that I worked on, inevitably what would happen is we would find out that these children had been trafficked all around the world. It was a great shock to me. Revelation that I had no idea that that was the extent of it. And in the U.S., 50% of sex trafficking victims are children, and the vast majority of them are runaway children. So why is human trafficking becoming more lucrative than guns and drugs? Guns and drugs can be sniffed out by dogs and are easily identifiable as contraband. Humans are not. Human trafficking victims don't self-identify as trafficking victims because they are coerced, they're intimidated, they're lied to, they're beaten up. They are trafficked across borders anonymously. So, not to make you all so depressed, where do we go from here? I believe that there is great hope. I believe that a parish such as St. Mary's can truly transform the culture. Because this really is, as you can see, a matter of transforming the culture, reclaiming the culture as a Catholic culture, to make the culture more of a child-centered, innocent culture. And that's what's happened. We have become so coarse, so over-sexualized. And this is the leadership role of the church. You know, the Catholic Church has been really providing the choke points for all of human history on human trafficking, because they cut off the supply and demand in their many, many prevention programs. You know, this is the prevention work of the church. The missionary church, they are the ones in Calcutta, in South Africa, in Asia, who are preventing children from being trafficked by their schools, by their orphanages, by their education programs. The church's quiet, humble, anonymous, consistent labor of love always saves more lives. And prevention cannot never be calculated or measured, but that's the work of the church. Well, it's a brave new world, isn't it? Where women are kidnapped, raped, and their babies are sold to same-sex couples. Human eggs are traded like spices. Wombs are rented like cars. The child is a commodity, and depending on the purveyor, is either aborted, manufactured, trafficked, or exploited. Reverence for the child is the gift of Christianity. It's the gift of the baby in the stable, Jesus Christ. Humanity has perverted God's plan, and it's only the Catholic Church that can restore the beauty of God's natural order of things. You know, in the words of Archbishop Chaput, wake up, Catholics. There are very real consequences of what is actually modern paganism. That's our culture. You know, I'm always amazed by the saints, especially the modern day saints. You know, not to be trite, but really we know in this country that one person can make a difference. I think of St. Francis Cabrini, who less than 100 years ago walked the streets of Chicago. And Mother Cabrini, as an Italian immigrant, came to the United States. She built, this is shocking to me, 67 schools, orphanages, hospitals around the United States. Then she went down to South America. She went down to, guess where? Argentina, the Pope's homeland, and did the same thing there. The power of one person with the love of God carrying out her mission can truly transform the world. You know, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, St. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, was 57 years old when she decided to form the Missionaries of Charity and go to Calcutta to service the poor. Now she has 500 establishments around the world, including the United States. This is the work of the church. And this is the hope that we can bring to the culture that is so coarse, so sexualized. You know, demand, demand, demand. If we can, as churchgoers, cut off the demand for prostitution, for pornography, that is a protective layer for children. Those of you who are mentors in North Chicago and Waukegan, who help our sharing parish, those are a protective layer against human trafficking. Getting involved as volunteers in juvenile court, foster parents, adoptive parents, prison ministry, the food pantry, domestic violence shelters. All of these activities prevent human trafficking, and they are the work of the church. grandparents helping to raise grandchildren, parents and grandparents who guard their grandchildren's iPhone like the Swiss guard guards the Pope. And I mean that seriously. Poverty, pornography, abortion, abuse, abandonment, violence, dysfunction, addiction, all causes human trafficking. Find a venue where you can make a difference. You know, prevention is the holy boots on the ground of the Catholic Church. The safety net the church provides with schools, with intervention programs, that's what's going to end the crime of human trafficking. You know, there was a woman, she was a slave in Sudan, St. Josephine Bakita. Her feast day is February 8th. And she was a Canossian nun. She left Sudan, she was trafficked to Italy, where she was freed in Italy. She joined the convent, and there she became a nun, and eventually John Paul II in 2000 canonized her a saint. We had some Canossian nuns at the conference, and they cornered the Pope, and they told the Pope, what we need is a saint who is a symbol of ending human trafficking, and they suggested St. Josephine Bakita, who is actually the patron saint of Sudan. And you know, her words are so simple. In fact, all she did when she joined the convent was stand at the door of the convent, greeting people, greeting children, lovingly with the words of God. So I think, you know, there are countless examples of where we as church members can turn to the saints for help and for guidance. You know, I often say in my work with missing kids that I had 3 great investigators with me. My investigative team was Michael, Anthony, and Mary. St. Michael, St. Anthony, missing children, the patron saint of the lost, and the Blessed Mother. I mean, we know that we have the Mass, we have the sacraments, we have the truth, we have the Eucharist, and we have the saints to help us to fight in this battle. On the final day of the trafficking conference, we were invited to go to the necropolis and have a private Mass right in front of the crypt of St. Peter. And this has been one of my favorite quotes of St. Peter, and I thought of it when I was there kneeling at Mass. Stay sober and vigilant. Your enemy, the devil, is prowling like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. And there we were, surrounded by the crypts of many popes and many martyrs who had fought to free the slaves, who had brought God to the ends of the earth. And I do think that at this point in time in our culture and in our history that our work is in fact sacramental. That's the work of the church. Yes, it's humanitarian, but it is sacramental in character. We are called to be the hands of Christ. We are called to bring Christ to the ends of the earth. We are called to be saints, and yes, we are called to be martyrs. St. Josephine Bakita, we ask for your intervention. Thank you very much. I would defer to the Holy Spirit to pray, you know, whatever your own mission, your own charism, your talents are, to really first pray for inspiration. Clearly, you know, abortion drives human trafficking, pornography drives human trafficking, prostitution does. You know, this is what I want, and I learned this working at Harpo in a media company. You people have the power. The public doesn't want you to know that you have the power. You can sit at your computer and be media missionaries. You can contact the CEO of MTV, of advertising companies that support bad television. You can have an impact and transform the culture. And, you know, the media doesn't want people to know that they have that power, but you do. You have that power. And so, you know, obviously many people can't be missionaries, but you can, with a small group of people, you could get the quality of television, the quality of the internet. You saw Pat Truman, many of you may have seen Pat Truman from Pornography Harms, a great organization. You can get involved in organizations like that. Helping, of course, pro-life groups is, you know, you will see very vulnerable women who desperately need help to carry them through crisis pregnancies and thereafter. You know, there's a whole, I mean, this is a community that has contacts and networks that go to the highest level of corporate America. Who sees human trafficking? The airlines see it, the hotels see it. I'm sure there are people here who know CEOs of airlines and hotels. Those are the ways that you can impact the culture. I'm going on. There's just so many ways. And it's, you know, I know from looking at the saints and studying the saints that, you know, one funny looking 57-year-old nun who has now 500 schools, orphanages, programs around the world, she's transformed the world. So that's what we believe. We have hope in God, all things are possible. And people don't want Catholics or good Christians to believe that there's any hope. I mean, you can look at that presentation and realize this is a hopeless situation. But if the people in this room decided to transform the world, in the culture, it can happen. And I've seen it happen in the media time and time again. You just won't hear people talking about it. What we saw, especially in China and in Asia, is that because there is sex selection abortion with one China policy, you will see that there is this huge gap of no women in all of Asia. It's just literally, you will go into villages in China and they're all little boys or teenage boys. We see the traffickers. What they're doing is constantly bringing women into to have abortions. I mean, it's been, and we don't see abortion providers contacting DCFS about children that are having abortions that have been exploited. We don't see them reporting them to law enforcement. There's this huge disconnect. You'll see, you know, feminists, this is, human trafficking is quite frankly their issue. There's just countless conferences by feminists. They will never talk about abortion, they will never talk about pornography, and rarely talk about prostitution. Because, you know, fair warning, there's a new movement among feminism described as sex workers, that women who are involved in prostitution have the right to be sex workers. You know, we heard about that at the conference. So it's kind of good to see the trend. So that is, I don't know if I'm explaining it, that is the connection between abortion on a practical level and human trafficking. On a global, spiritual, theological level, it's when a child is not welcomed, when a child is not blessed, the culture begins to degrade. And that, you know, what did Christ say? He said, bring little children to me. Touching the head of a child, unless you become like one of these, you will not enter into heaven. I mean, those are sobering words. And so with contraception, with abortion, with the sexualization of the culture has become the commodity of the child, that the child can be discarded. And so for that reason, I mean, Father would be much more articulate than I am in describing the theological underpinnings of what has impacted the culture in the world because of abortion. But these are, you know, the logical consequences of what has happened. You know, as I said, every time I give a speech, somebody comes up to me and has created a nonprofit organization, a foundation, is working in Haiti. I mean, it doesn't take, you don't have to devote your life, a week, a day, a month, doing that kind of work. Just met a group of women who go down to Haiti and are talking to women about human trafficking. There's lots of things that are going on in the church. You know, my message to you is to not let, despite, you know, the grim picture, to not let this discourage you. That there are, you know, Father had just talked on Ash Wednesday about the many opportunities during Lent. I mean, 5 miles north of us, there's human trafficking going on, severe dysfunction, families in desperate need of help. There's just all sorts of resources that the Catholic Church is involved in. You know, the Catholic Church doesn't pat itself on the back. They just go about the business of doing it, you know. Father?
Well, even this week, we have Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos. Many of you know we were, the Pequeños, there's 15 different centers in Latin America and Haiti. The group that we visited in Nicaragua, they're coming to visit us. It's in the bulletin. We're having a little dinner and before. But, you know, one of the things about how to, you know, supporting a place like that is making a difference that children aren't on the street. And when we were down there in July, we heard the stories of some of the people about how they got there, the young people. One boy at the age of 10 was on the street of Managua, and thankfully, when the police picked him up, he went to NPH. But also, places like NPH, they have to be very careful who they hire, because people be, like in El Salvador, I know Grayson, and say to like a staff member, can you deliver 8 girls to me? And they're offered money to deliver children from an orphanage or a child's home. So just the integrity of these places and what they do, they're keeping children from being exploited. So I think when we support places like the NPH, we're helping prevent human trafficking.
Absolutely. There are 1 million children supposedly on the streets of Rio de Janeiro. And you know, and the Catholic Church and the missionaries that are out there doing this great work that's prevention. It can't be measured, you won't be able to see it in a statistic, but that's what the church does. And here at St. Mary's, you know, I'm just a great believer in the Catholic imagination, the things that can be done to really transform the culture. And that's what it is. It's a culture of war. It's going to be a battle. But you have the power. And, you know, we have theological hope. We don't have hope and change. We have theological hope. It is grounded in belief that all things are possible with Christ. And so for that reason, you know, we can transform the culture. And so I would encourage you to pray about it during Lent. There's lots of things going on in this area. And yes.
I was going to ask, are you going in April for the second conference they're having, I believe the 14th and 15th? There's a second round.
No, I don't think so. And one of the interesting things is that, you know, I mean, having been involved in this work, all you have to do is go on YouTube and look at what the Salesian nuns are doing in Cambodia. I mean, you know, it just is incredible. You know, they have these huge orphanages where these kids are dressed and fed and you know, and getting incredible love and education. I mean, the work of the church is really impacting human trafficking. But for that reason, you know, to try and get the church out of the public square. You know, in Illinois, sadly, Catholic Charities is no longer doing adoption or foster care. And you know, what happened, you probably saw this sometimes, what happened is this year, child deaths skyrocketed at DCFS. You know, you begin to wonder, is it because the Catholic Church is no longer involved in this work? Same thing, Massachusetts is out of the work of foster care and adoption. This weekend, there was a big article on what's happening, same thing, child deaths in Massachusetts. So for that reason, the USCCB, the Bishops' Conference, had a $15 million grant for human trafficking from the U.S. government. They had an independent audit. They were the best of all the providers, the best, the quality of work. But because they would not refer for abortion services, they lost their human trafficking grant. I mean, that's a tragedy. And what it means is that ideology trumps quality. And, you know, when that starts happening in a culture, what happens is, you know, things like Argentina. So, but we as Catholics can step up, I think, and fill that void. And I would, you know, encourage you, you know, our modern day martyrs, maybe, you know, certainly the nuns working in, you know, the mission fields, but many of them, you know, the business owners who filed HHS lawsuits, if you talk to them as I have, you know, they feel like they're being martyred. So, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to evangelize religious freedom, demanding that Catholics reclaim the public square. I mean, that's what it's about, reclaiming the Catholics built this country. The nuns building the Francis Cabrini's, the Catherine Drexels, they built this country. They educated generations of immigrants. So we have to be reminded of our history. Absolutely. What can we do about it? Well, absolutely. You know, what you can do about it is, if there was a group of 10 or 15, look at what Mothers Against Drunk Drivers did. They transformed the laws in a matter of a few years. And it was women who didn't really have any skills. I mean, they lost children, so it was their passion. So women fathers getting together, writing the advertisers, writing the CEOs, putting heat on them. They're not used to getting heat. They're not, they want to please the consumer. If you show them that there's an unhappy consumer, they back off. And so, yeah, I mean, I would really encourage people not to be fearless and to just hammer away. Whatever your thing is, you know, the industry, you know, H&M, all those, I mean, Abercrombie and Fitch is just absolutely, you know, has been appalling in the past. So, yes, I mean, each one of those things contributes to the sexualization, hypersexualization of the culture. And, you know, why aren't we applauding innocence? Why aren't we keeping our children innocent as long as possible so that they can grow and mature and have just discernment about all sorts of issues? But you never hear innocence talked about, you never hear purity talked about. Actually, I heard about purity talked about on Duck Dynasty. So I think, you know, I would encourage people to really, I mean, those issues, I mean, those spoke to your heart, absolutely. Yes.
You know, we all can pray, and the Supreme Court on the Feast of the Incarnation is going to be hearing about the HSO. I mean, that's unbelievable. It's not a coincidence. There's no coincidences. God manages everything. But just imagine, any date could have been, but March 25th is the Feast of the Incarnation, and that's the day the Supreme Court is going to be talking about the HSO mandate. So I think we should pray particularly for that.
Power of prayer. I mean, I can't tell you how many cases I worked on where it's just so frustrating, we weren't getting anywhere, and I'd be on the phone for months with law enforcement, FBI agents, and all of a sudden, we'd find out they're Catholic, and they're faithful Catholics. And I've had FBI agents say, well, there's nothing we can do now except pray. And then all of a sudden the case gets resolved. So it's, you know, the power of prayer. You know, I believe the best missing children's investigator is St. Anthony. You know, he's been by my side. When all hope is lost, you know, you call on the Blessed Mother, St. Anthony, and St. Michael, especially in this battle.